therapist has to talk a little quicker. Who knows? I don't know. I wouldn't count on it. All right, so like I said, I'm very excited to be back. I think that I want to give a commercial for the whole difference of just taking a little bit of time for you. I'm not sure if you've done that in your world. I'm not sure if you've taken the time to just take a few days or a little bit of time and change your scenery, do something fun, shift it up a little bit. It's so rejuvenating, it's so inspiring, and I'm just feeling so, I didn't even think when I was coming back that I was rested enough. Like I was a little bit poopy this week coming back from vacation. I was like, oh, I gotta do my work, I gotta get ready for Sunday and all. And it wasn't until I was in the energy of it that I realized how much I actually feel great. And so I'm saying this to you all just because I want you to do it for yourselves. I think it's important that we take the responsibility of taking time for ourselves and making sure that taking care of ourselves. And so have some fun. You have an assignment this week. Go out and have something, do something fun. Go kayaking, go to the beach, climb something, hug a tree, sit in a hammock, read a novel. Read a novel. I read a novel. I haven't read a novel in a long time. I read a lot, but I haven't read a novel in a long time, All of these simple things, but just taking the stand to take care of yourself by doing one thing this week. And it has to be fun. And so I want you to come back next Sunday and tell me what fun thing you've done. And then you'll get a gold star. You always get a gold star, doesn't matter. So coming back into what we're talking about, this month we've been talking about wholeness, divine wholeness. And my talk today is loving ourselves back to wholeness. And that came from the idea that, sometimes it feels like we're splintered. Sometimes it feels like we're living these lives and we have all these different roles that we play, and we have all these different responsibilities, and it can feel like we're being pulled in a million different directions. And as you can probably guess from what I've been talking about so far, I was feeling that before I left. I'm not anymore. What happens is that so often we allow ourselves to be immersed by the outside world and to be pulled in so many different directions at once that we don't know where we are sometimes. At times, we have this idea of who we are and how we're showing up in the world, and are very clear about that. And then one thing will happen on the outside, and it shows us, whoops, nope, that's not true. Who said that? Where did that come from? We might have a reaction, an anger reaction might come out of nowhere to someone that we love. Or maybe it's a judgment on something that we see out in the world, and we think of ourselves as a welcoming, open person, non-judgmental, accepting of all lives, and then all of a sudden we see someone walking down the street, whoop, nope, yeah, that goes out the window, right? And so there's this idea that we're splintered. There's like this experience of being separate pieces. And also, I come from the filter of being a Gemini, and I try not to claim that very much, but I am, which means that there's more than one of me within my head. Please don't 5150 me. I'm fine. I'm not hearing voices. But there's just a couple aspects of me that talk at certain times, that Gemini is the twins, just in case you don't know astrology. And so I could go hot and cold, I could go yes or no, I could go, pink, blue, whatever. I could do whatever it is. And at any one moment, And so the whole idea is integration. And so what we're talking about this month is how we live an integrated whole life, how we stretch our consciousness wide enough to accept all the aspects of ourselves and embrace it. Because it's through acceptance and embracing the totality of who we are that we love ourselves back to wholeness. We have to love ourselves back to wholeness. We can't force ourselves to be a way that we're not. Right? Have you ever tried to be something that you're not? Have you ever tried to show up in a way that, they're going to, showing up in a certain way? I remember when I was first at, here we go again, I already started and I'm already off on a tangent. Hello, she's back. And so I remember when I started at the church way back when I was really young, I was invited to the first donor dinner that my community had, and it was a very big fancy affair. It was back in the day where they took the top 10% of givers and they took them to some big fancy dinner and loved them up and expected them to write big checks. That's kind of how it worked back in the day. And I don't know how, I was a young, poor massage therapist, and I was one of the biggest givers in the community, which says a lot, I guess. But I was committed to tithing, and so I was a tither. And so I got invited to this dinner that was at La Berge. In my car, I had an old clunker of a Tercel, and I had to drive it up to the valet. Have you ever had to do one of those things where they only had valet parking? And my muffler was broken. There's a hole in my muffler. And so I was like, and I'm like driving up in my, with the prettiest dress I could come up with, and I walked in there trying to be who I wasn't, and I remember handing the keys to the guy, and he said, "Oh, honey, it's okay." And I'm like, "Thank you." And I took my borrowed bag, I had my borrowed Prada bag, and somebody gave me some fancy shoes, and I walked into this dinner, at La Berge when I was 25 years old in a clunker of a car. I was trying to be something that I wasn't at the time. And I realized that at that moment that I had to show up as who I was. I realized that I'm not going to try and pretend to be something that I'm not. And so it took me accepting all of me, loving all of me into that place where I could go forward and still say, I'm not going to run and I'm not going to pretend, I'm going to be who I am. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how we can allow all the aspects of us to be part of our growth and unfoldment. It's so funny, I was thinking about it, and wholeness, like I said, it's a state of integration. It's a state of inner peace. It's a state of acceptance and allowing who we are to be, right? And so when we're standing in the middle of the storm of life sometimes, and it feels like everything's whirling around us, and we are at peace. And I know that each and every one of us is already there, right? That we're all in that place where we can just navigate life so calmly and wonderfully until the jerk cuts us off on the highway. Or until the person cuts us in line when we've been waiting for a long time, right? Right? Is that where we are? Yeah, that's where we're really at. And so the idea is to know that we've got work to do there. We've got personal work to do about just allowing life to be and accepting the experiences that we've had that have gotten us to this moment. One of the things that we're talking about specifically, and I'm so grateful for the reading that Suzanne did today, is about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a spiritual practice that loves us back to wholeness. Forgiveness is that ongoing experience that will allow us to see greater, the view of our lives. And that's what I'm focusing on today. Because life brings us lots of different kinds of experiences. And unfortunately, sometimes the experience of betrayal is part of it. Sometimes we are living our lives and doing what's happening and going through the motions of doing the best that we can. And that's what I truly believe. I walk through life with the idea that in any one situation, everyone's trying to do the best that they can. And I hold that space for everyone. But sometimes their best still feels like betrayal. Sometimes the best that someone's doing feels like that it's painful and it's hurtful. And so all of us, give me a nod please, have experienced something like betrayal, that you would consider betrayal, right? It just feels like it's part of the life path. And so, we're all navigating this life, and sometimes our lives kind of collide in interesting different ways. I had a great opportunity last night, and I don't even know how we got there, but a small group of us ended up in the Redlands doing a Twilight Labyrinth walk. Somebody got an email and then sent it out and said, hey, you want to try this? And we all said, yeah, okay, great. And then I didn't even know where we were headed. I got in the car with them, and they were like, oh yeah, we're going to Redlands. I'm like, what? What's in Redlands? I've never been there. I don't know what it is, And we went up, and there was this group that I still don't even know what the group is. I got to figure out who we hung out with last night. It was a group of like 20 people, and it was beautiful. It was right at sunset, and they did this lovely meditation, and then there's this gorgeous, large, the sharp labyrinth up there. And so the gongs were playing, and we all walked the labyrinth. And for me, I love doing that as a spiritual practice. It always speaks to me. It always reminds me. I always have some major spiritual experience, which I don't even know. It happened again last night. I don't even know what that is yet. But it always reminds me, just walking it reminds me of, it's the metaphor for walking the path of life. That sometimes there's these places where we are walking back and forth, and sometimes there's long stretches of a path, right? And then we turn a corner, and all of a sudden there's all of these little twists and turns that happen. And then we hit another long path, and we get kind of close to the center, and you think you're almost there, but all of a sudden it turns around. It's like you're almost to where you want to get to, and then it turns you and takes you way far away again. and all you can do is walk forward. That all you can do is walk forward. And so I was thinking about it this morning, and these moments that feel like betrayals are kind of those moments when my long path is hitting somebody else's short path. When they're in their tumult, when they're in their challenge, when they're in their question of where they're going and what's happening, and they bump into me. My path bumps into them. And it feels like, ow, it hurts. And so the idea here is for us, we've got a choice when these things happen, of how we see it, of how we handle it. The thing about betrayal is that when it comes to us and it's somebody that we don't know, it's almost easier to take, right? When our lives bump up against somebody that we don't know, sometimes it's easier to say, okay, well, they're in their stuff, and I don't know who they are, or they're doing their thing, and I can easier let it go a little bit easier. But it's when the people that are close to us do something that hurts us. When it's our friends and our family, the ones that we're vulnerable with, the ones that we show our true selves to, those are the moments that sting the most. Those are the moments where we are called to bring the light of forgiveness. Those are the moments when it's hard to do that. And when we don't let it go, when we don't practice forgiveness, it just adds to that luggage, that baggage that I talk about all the time that doesn't have wheels that we drag around with us all the time. Remember my picture of that? There's stuff that we have in our luggage, in our baggage, that we hold on to that just gets heavier and heavier and drags us down. There's no wheels on that piece of luggage. There's nothing that helps us, but we have to drag it from our own muscle and our own energy. We have a choice. We could practice forgiveness. When we begin to have a forgiving heart, when we practice that idea of letting it be, and starting to look and see what the blessing is that it brings to us, then we can be free. Then we can surrender and let go of that which we've been carrying. You know, Jesus taught forgiveness was one of his main teachings. From Matthew 18, it says, Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times, he said. And the master answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 times. And I remember being a child and hearing that and going, what? What's that mean? And what it means is that it's ongoing. What it means is that we're supposed to practice forgiveness until we are, all the time. That it's cultivating a forgiving heart, cultivating a forgiving nature. It's not something that we just do once. It's something that we continually do. I had an experience recently where I was with someone who I haven't been with for a long time. And we were stuck in this situation, and I was not at my best, I'll admit it, I'm human. There were moments where my buttons were pushed, and I was reacting in a way that I was not comfortable with in this one relationship. And I'm not with her all the time, and I don't have a chance to talk to her all the time, and it was really bothering me because I didn't understand it. And so in my prayer work, and this was like a big family reunion thing, and I had to remove myself from the situation. I found a bathroom in the back and closed the door and just sat on the side of the tub and did a meditation and said, okay, I need to look at this differently. Why is my heart hurting about this? And I had my own stuff about it, but I felt like I had to clear it with her. So I went to her and I said, listen, I just need to let you know I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm in the middle of a process, and I realize that I've not done my best, and I apologize. And she said to me, she looked at me and she said, I forgive you. I forgive you. And one more for good measure, I forgive you. I was like, whoa, okay. Thank you, Did that feel like forgiveness? It felt like it was an affirmation of you were wrong, you were wrong, you were wrong, right? And so sometimes it's not about the words. It's about the feeling behind it. I didn't need to be forgiven. I was clear. I apologize. I felt clear. I unhooked myself from it. I practiced self-forgiveness over that. I'm glad that she forgave me in her way, and everybody's doing the best they can do, right? Let's remember that. I'm using the umbrella of that. Everybody's doing the best that they can do in one moment. But it's how we feel in our hearts, and that's the most important thing. If we move through this life with a forgiving heart, if we move through this life with an open heart, expressing our love and being who we are, everybody around us will feel it. And the people that you are in relationship will know it, whether you say it or not. One of the things we learn in the science of mind is that we are each called to take responsibility for our own reactions. We're supposed to take responsibility for our own being, for our choices, for our reactions, for our emotions, for our feelings. We are responsible for them. Nobody else can make us feel any way. We are all in reaction to it. They may press the button, as one of my teachers says, but they didn't install it. We are the ones that installed our buttons. They're the ones that press it to remind us that they're there for us to clear them. And so, we are called to own our feelings and our reactions. We see the choices, we're called to see the choices that we have made to get us to the point where the event happened. And not out of blame. It's truly not a case of you were right and they were wrong, or they were right and you were wrong. It's not about that. It's about self-awareness of waking up to the fact that we can choose differently. It's about waking up to the fact that we can be differently in the world. We talk about that you change your thinking, you change your life. Now that's the science of mind 101, right? You change your thinking, you change your perspective, you change your life. From your words and your beliefs, you call forth your experience. That's the foundational teaching of this philosophy in this church. But the deeper understanding of that is you draw to yourself who you are. You draw to yourself the experiences and the situations that match who you are in the world. And so the overarching question that I'm going to ask you today is, who do you want to be in the world? How do you want to show up in the world? Who are you? Are you a loving, accepting, supportive, inspiring person? Because I know that's the truth of who you are. That's the truth of who you've come here to be. And are we able to allow ourselves to start to be that? Or are we so stuck in our reactions and holding on to those old hurts and those old pains that other people have done to us that you can't even see your greatness and you can't even see your joy? My goal for us is to see the blessing that each of us are for this world. Life is a feedback mechanism, is what I think of it. Is that we're sitting in the middle of this. Everything's about. Ernest Holmes has a book called "It's Up to You," and in it they talk about how it's all about you, right? And so there are moments where people can think that this is a really self-centered philosophy. But it's not. It's just that we start with the self. We start realizing that we are in the center of this ginormous feedback mechanism. Yes, and I know that that's not a real word. Enormous, big, large, whatever you want to say. Ginormous feedback mechanism of life. And so everything that happens is a mirror for us of something to look at. And it's not that it needs to change us. It's not that we're broken. It's not that there's something wrong with us. But we are always evolving and growing, and we always have an opportunity to become more. We always have a chance to step up into our expansion and our growth. And life allows that. No, it doesn't allow it. Life makes that happen. Life doesn't allow us, and you could call it life, you could call it God, you could call it spirit, you could call it love, and my favorite is the force. It could be whatever you want to call it. But it's not going to let you live a small life. It's not going to let you live with your light under a bushel for long. You may feel like it has. But life is going to pick you up and move you into a situation and shake you enough until you wake up. And so this feedback mechanism allows us to make the choice. I'm either going to step up or I'm going to step down. But we have to take the chance. We have to take the chance, the opportunity to grow and to expand. And that takes courage. It takes courage to face stuff that might be uncomfortable. Do you know how uncomfortable it was for me? I showed up at this family reunion as the minister. And I'm the one who's having all the reactions. You always revert back sometimes. Well, for me, my experience has been that I always revert back to who I was when I was 12 with my family. That was not pretty. I was not pretty when I was 12. Talk about reactive. And so, you know, it takes courage to look at ourselves and say, you know what, maybe I did the best I could in that moment, but maybe it's not my true best. Maybe I could have been different. It takes compassion to realize that it's okay. That it's okay to do some self-acceptance. It's okay that you showed up how you showed up. And it takes a willingness. It takes a willingness to grow. And we know sometimes growth is not comfortable. I think of those seeds that crack open when they start to grow. That cannot be comfortable. That seed, when it cracks and that root goes down and that plant starts to grow, that can't be comfortable for the seed. It might have been comfortable being closed, but seeds were not made to stay closed. Seeds are made to grow. We are all seeds. We are made to grow. And so that growth may feel painful. That growth may feel like betrayal. That growth may feel like failure. It may feel like failure to you. But we trust that everything that is happening in this life is happening for our good. Everything that is happening for your growth and for your good. And so if you're still in the painful part, if you're still in the darkness of it, you're still in the middle of it. You're not there yet. And that's when we cultivate our faith. That's when we lean in on what we know. That's when we reach out for prayer. That's when we talk to a friend who knows the greatness that we are. It's important that we surround ourselves with people who can see us and know us for who we are, because they can help in these kinds of situations. So when we have a choice as to how we're going to show up in this world, I think of it as a spiral. And I talk about this a lot in classes, that we have a choice. We can either spiral up or we can spiral down. It depends on where you want to go, and it's really up to you. If we spiral up, when you spiral up, what you do is you realize that everything that's happening, even the most painful, difficult situations of your life, are there to show you something greater about yourself. We trust God in this life so much that we can see that we are moving to a place of a greater expression of who we've come here to be. That everything is guiding us to a greater vista of life, a greater vista of who we are, and we step up to allow that process to happen. And more often than not, we slide down the spiral. Down reminds me of Chutes and Ladders. Ever play that? I remember when my child was young, I'm like, this is the longest game ever. Can we ever just get it done? Because at the very end, you're going to slide back down to number one. I'm like, oh, that's always me. We got to start again. I'm like, please win, please win. No. So that spiral down is like that slide that just takes us down. When we don't accept what's happening in our life, we end up sliding down that spiral into the basement. Have you ever been in a basement? I'm from New England. We all had basements. I don't think they have basements here. But basements are cut into the ground, or they're cut into the land, you know? And there's probably very little light. There's no windows. You can't see anything. And they're dark, and they're dank, and they're, musty. I was scared of mine until I was 12 in my house. But the situation is this: when we create from the place of what we know, if we spiral down into that place where we're in a place of blame, that we're in a place of I've been wronged, when we live in that place that somebody else did this to me, all you can see is that. And then what do we create? See, what we learn is that what we put our attention on grows. What we put our attention on expands. What we put our attention on, we experience. So if we slide down into that basement, that place of limitation, that place of being insulated into our own pain, what do you think we're going to call forth? More of that. And you know what that does? It solidifies our point. See? I was right. Life is like this. Life is out to get me. I'm not good enough. Everybody's just going to cheat me. Nobody's going to stay. I'm not lovable. Whatever the story is, it just continues itself, and it continues itself, and it continues itself until we stop it and take a different step. Until we stop and say, this is not the truth of who I am. Forgiveness, the practice of forgiveness, is the escalator out of the basement. The practice of forgiveness is the elevator that takes you to the height, so you can see clearly, so you can see your life from a new perspective. And you can start to see that everything really is there for your good, that everything really is there for your growth. And then things start to shift, and you begin to see the blessings of life. And what happens when you see the blessings and you acknowledge them, and you thank God and the universe for the blessings that you've got? Gratitude, followed behind forgiveness, just multiplies it. And then you're off and running. And then you can start to see that these situations are not about you. You have not been personally attacked. You have not been betrayed because you're not good enough. It's a situation that you have given this other person the chance to take their step up or their step down. And I'll tell you, there is a reaction to every action, and sometimes it's almost infuriating when somebody does something and you're like, oh, they're going to get theirs, and then you wait. They're going to get theirs. They're going to get theirs. And we don't see it, right? Sometimes it doesn't look like anything happens. Well, it's not ours to do, and it's not ours to wish somebody else pain. But I have to tell you, they're going to get theirs. They're going to get it, because there is an action, there's a reaction for every action. And if someone is putting out something negative, I'll tell you, they're going to get something, they're going to get their own feedback mechanism, showing them that, and it is an avalanche. And it's almost better to sit down and pray for them, because they're going to need it, right? And so we hold on to these betrayals, and we keep it alive in our hearts. And that's the thing that drives me insane, because when we do that, we close our hearts down. We close them down. And so the practice of forgiveness is not about making anything okay. The practice of forgiveness is not saying, oh, it's all right that you did that. I can get over it, because you know we can't. It's not about that. The practice of forgiveness is acknowledging that something happened and realizing that in the scope of life, in the path of life, these things happen to bring us to a greater space. And when you can use that understanding to unhook from the experience, you can be free. The other person might not be. We might need to make a different choice to not have that person in our lives, but hello, who wants someone that you can't trust in your life? But you can know that they're going to have their own experience. And that life is going to bring them to where they need to go. It's not our job, it's the divine's job to allow that to unfold. Science and nature have proven that nothing happens in life without a reaction. Cause and effect is real. It frees us. Forgiveness frees us. It releases us from the pain and continual recreation of the events in other ways. So this is one of my main points that I want us to all get. The importance of doing forgiveness work is this. If we don't let these things go, they keep coming back. They may be different actors in different settings with a different storyline, but it keeps coming back over and over again. If you think about it for a second, I'm not going to ask you, just think in your mind for a second about some big thing that's happened in your past that hurt you, where you felt betrayed. If you distill that down to the feeling, not the story, not the characters, not the situation, but the feeling of what happened in that, I bet you could trace the other times in your life that it has shown up in different ways. Anybody already get there? Yeah, right? Yeah. It's powerful. And so it's not about the latest one. And I know that the situation that happened to me over the summer was not about that situation. It was about something that happened 25 years ago. That I had still been holding in this little pocket of my heart that had been taking up some room there, that had closed part of my heart off. And so it took taking the moment of forgiving and letting go of the first one, and then everything else fell like dominoes after that. And that's what happens. We will continually recreate things from the energetic, the feeling of where the hurt started. And so we get to release, and we get to release, and we get to release. That's why it's not one thing. It's not I forgive you, right? It's a forgiving heart. It's a practice, and it's not easy. And it's work. It's spiritual work. And so if we want to be free, if we want to live a full, free, joyful life, we got to do our work. It takes some attention and intention to let that go. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science and the science of mind, says this: "We shall do well to remember this lesson. How often we condemn when we should forgive. How often censure when we might praise. What untold grief of heart might be relieved by words of cheer and forgiveness. Remembering that spirit holds no evil toward man, and that God is love, we should emulate this divine lesson and forgive all, that our hearts may be free from the burden of our own condemnation." Our hearts want to be free. Can we free our hearts? Because when you free your heart, you free your life. And so the whole point again is that we have a choice as to how we want to live. And this is the question that only we can answer. Despite the hurts that you have gone through, despite the challenges and difficulties that you feel that you have endured, who do you want to be in this world? And how do you want to show up? Because let me tell you, you have a choice. If we allow that cycle to continue and to slide down into the basement, and we're living in that space with no light and no air, and with our own pain, what kind of life does that look like? I'm sure we all know people who live like that. I'm sure we all know the grumpy, cranky people that live like that. God bless them. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to hold on to something that's 40 years old. And it's freaking me out that I can actually say that I can hold on to a hurt that's 40 years old, but I can now. Spiritual work. I got spiritual work to do. Or do we want to live from that high vista? We want to be people who show up with our hearts open. The ability to give our love freely. To be who we are and not to question it. Not to fear what other people are going to say about you. Because you were made in the image and likeness of God. You are the expression of the One. And you are God ordained to live a full life. And we do that through opening our hearts. We do that through being brave enough to have our hearts open as we go into relationships. And I know how hard it is after they've been hurt. But what I want you to know is this. Your heart is not brittle. It's not going to shatter if you get stung again. What you're going to realize is that your heart is a muscle. And as we go through each of these experiences, it gets stronger. And you're able to love more. Heartbreak isn't something that annihilates us. It strengthens us. We can walk through this life, when we choose to walk through this life with our heart open, with who we are expressing forward. Our hearts are stronger than we could ever imagine. When we live from our heart, we create a life that is in the energetic of what the seed that was planted by God within us. And then everything unfolds in the blessings that way. And so I want you to take a second and close your eyes. If you're comfortable, put your hand on your heart. I want you to breathe for a second from your heart. Heart first. Find the energetic. Try and feel what's alive in your heart right now. That light at the core. And if you have to dig deep, your hearts are also infinite in depth. And so maybe you got to go a little deeper today to find that light. And when you find it, I want you to breathe fully, breathe it out, breathe it, expand it. Whatever image is going to work for you to bring it forward as the gift for yourself. And when you're ready, you can come on back. When our hearts are open, we can breathe. When our hearts are open and they lead us, we realize that everything in our life is there for our good. Everything. We can expand our consciousness to embrace all of ourselves and love ourselves back to wholeness, which is already there. You're not whole. You're all parts of you. But when we have an acceptance and a compassionate forgiveness for ourselves and for others, we experience that wholeness. We begin to see that life is for us and not against us. And our lives continually bring us all the experiences that we need to climb out of the basement and move to that place where we can see that gorgeous sunset, that beautiful mountaintop vista that is your life. You were created. You were a thought in the mind of God, and you were created. You were meant to be here. You have a purpose, and your purpose is to love. And so in this week, you've got 2 assignments. One is to do something fun, and the other is to have your heart lead you through your week and love yourself and your life. And so it is.